The Blindside Podcast is not associated or affiliated with my current employers and is voluntarily recorded and produced on my own time. This episode of the Blindside Podcast contains language that might be offensive to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. This episode of the Blindside Podcast is being streamed live on youtube.com/blindmotogamer. Be sure to subscribe for great content and so much more. Hello everyone, Blind Metal Gamer here. It's now time for another podcast. In today's episode, the returning Kentucky Blue Blood is back once again to continue her story of what it was like growing up in the 1960s with a disorder. So without any further ado or delay, I'm going to hand the floor over to Kentucky Blue Blood, and I'm going to allow her to continue her story of growing up in the 1960s. Kentucky Blue Blood, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if you could hear me or not. I just was unmuted. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to talk about a lot about mental health today and our state process and how we help people towards recovery. And Beverly Thompson will be joining us later. She's the author of Antidepressed, a book that tells you, basically it's giving you informed consent about all the different medications. So I was telling Tim earlier, I didn't get diagnosed with a mental illness until I was 38 years old. And actually, we found I was misdiagnosed because it wasn't mental illness. It was actually trauma from a sexual assault of a doctor that happened in the 70s. So I was medicated for 20 years and kept getting worse and worse on the medication. So I'm going to kind of lead up into that. But the one thing I noticed, I was growing up in the 60s, and what was unique about that was I had 3 siblings with a rare genetic disorder that were treated really badly. And eventually the state took custody of them. They became wards of the state. And they had tragic deaths, and they were abused in care, and they were totally devalued as human beings. So I saw that, and what the similarities are, that when I got diagnosed with a mental illness, they started treating me like that. They thought I was a liar. They devalued me. They would put me, if I made somebody mad, they would put me on the end of the list for the housing or whatever services I was trying to get. I was really abused in the courts for that. And they can take your children, or due to your disability or your child's disability in Kentucky and I think 5 other states, and not work to reunify your family, basically just destroy your family. And that happened to me not once, but twice. And if you didn't have a mental illness, I'd say that would make you pretty mentally ill, because there's nothing worse than having the state take control of your family and you not being able to see them. So over the years, I have talked to thousands of people, probably in Kentucky, at least hundreds. I don't want to say thousands, but I know there are thousands of us out there that have had the same type of situation happen to them. So, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. So basically what happened, I stayed on the medication. I was compliant, and I went to therapy, and I did everything I could, but we were pretty much working with a medical model, an evidence-based model, instead of a recovery model when I started out. And everybody said, oh, get on these boards, get a seat at the table and you can change things if you don't like it. Well, you know what? I did that and nothing's hardly changed. So I don't know how true that is, but I did that, and I encourage other people to do that, but definitely to be vocal about it. So, but basically, you're already beat down, and then they're beating you down further, taking your children or, treating you like a piece of dirt. And that is something Blind Metal Gamer is going to talk about later, is the Wlfensberger's theory, which I wasn't aware of. But he said some people use that when they're dealing with people with disabilities. So he's going to talk about that a little later. So basically, I was compliant. I'm a peer specialist. I took every training that was offered. I've sat at every table. I've listened to everything the workers listen to, their continuing education hours. And trauma-informed care is what finally saved me. In 2012, I read Mad in America, and I got off my medication with the help of my doctor. I weaned off of it, and I had major depression and anxiety. So when I weaned off, I still had some trauma there. So I was referred to the crisis center. And I was lucky. I found a great person there to work with, a social worker. And the social workers can be trained in this EMDR. So that's what I used, EMDR. And she really helped me working through the trauma. And I had layers of trauma. So, but eventually I healed working with her, and I'm able to talk about the trauma like today. When before, if I tried to talk to you like today, I would be crying. There's no way I could talk about anything that had happened in my past, because it still makes me mad, because you're picking on vulnerable, weak people at their worst moment. So, anyway, I found Robert Whitaker first, Mad in America. He's on Twitter. Their group's on Twitter. And they have so much information about mental illness and people that have recovered, people that have went on to work in the field to warn other people. Then we have Medicating Normal. They have a new film out. They're also on Twitter. Their film's available on Prime. I would suggest you watch it. Kevin Miller has Letters from Generation RX. That's a film. Kevin Miller is on Twitter. He sounded the alarm about medicating children, and it's a multiple billion-dollar industry. We're medicating children younger than 3 years old. The medicine caused brain damage to me, and children's brains are still forming. But when I got off the medicine, it was like I was a stroke survivor, a survivor of a traumatic brain injury. I used to speak properly. I was well educated. You can't tell that now, because I did get my verbal language back, but it's nowhere near the professional that I once was. So I apologize if you think, I'm not educated, but I am pretty knowledgeable about my subject matter here. Anyway, so it causes brain damage, brain atrophy. That basically we weren't warned, and so now these professionals I'm honoring here sounded the alarm that the chemical imbalance theory was a myth made up by big pharma to sell drugs. Now we've got a pandemic of people on psychiatric drugs that can't get off the drugs. If they want to, they're stuck on the drugs. People have killed themselves because they're on the drugs. So, I feel like once you have a duty to warn other people. And I wish somebody would have warned me, like the doctors that gave me these drugs. And I basically got drugged and labeled mentally ill for telling on the doctor for sexually abusing me. And, I said to them, I could tell they didn't believe me. I'm like, I have proof. It was in the newspaper and everything. I have records. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter if we believe you or not. We're going to treat you the same way anyway. I guess one size fits all, huh? And then they try to medicate my daughter. They want to tell you it's your whole family. It runs in families. There's no DNA or genetic component to this yet. I know they'd love to, get there, but it's not there. Because there's not one diagnostic test to prove a mental illness. It's all what you report, whatever signs and symptoms you report. So that kind of goes back to trauma. When you're traumatized, you want to medicate yourself or numb your feelings so you don't feel the pain. So basically, the very first person was Dr. Heather Ashton, and she came with the Ashton Manual, and that was on benzos, withdrawing from benzos and the harm of taking benzos. And that's kind of when I started my withdrawal. So, people were talking about her, but I didn't use her method as much. But I do want to mention her because she died at the age of 92. And she's well known in the field of people that are trying to warn people about these medications. The other one is Jim Gottstein. He's the author of the Zyprexa papers. He's an attorney. And two of the agencies that helped me a lot that I really admire their work is NARPA, which is National Association for Rights, Protection and Advocacy, and also Protection and Advocacy in Kentucky. I learned so much from these agencies, and I'm just honored to be in their company because they fight for the rights of others. And that's why I'm an advocate today. Protection and Advocacy I founded in 2001, and they help me. And they also advocate for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I try to be a cross-disability advocate and advocate for both sides. But the mental health side is just enormous. And, I've tried to get away from it because once I got off the medicine, I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere. Because I'm not totally anti-psychiatry, but I'm definitely not into medicating people into oblivion either. Hopefully there's a happy medium, but I feel like we're just throwing drugs at anybody and everybody. We're medicating children. We're medicating geriatric patients. Wow. Just say no to some of these drugs. I mean, I went to the emergency room for a heart attack and they tried to give me sleeping pills. I didn't go there for sleeping pills. Sleeping pills are dangerous. I sleep just fine. I have a pretty clear conscience. But, and then somebody accused me of shaming people yesterday for sharing my personal experience. I am shaming somebody. I'm going to shame the psychiatrists that write these drugs and Big Pharma, but I'm not shaming anybody that takes these drugs. If you need these drugs, that's fine. Take them. All we're asking is that you get informed consent, that it could cause suicide, it could cause homicidal ideation, cause weight gain, sexual dysfunction. And the latest thing I read was it can cause autism and ADHD in children if the mother takes them during pregnancy. So I'm mad we've been lied to. I was lied to. It cost me my whole life. I lost everything, my career, my company, my children, my family, not my children. I only have one child, but the cost is too great. People treat you differently once you're on these medicines, and you do act differently because it changes who you are as a person. And you don't even realize it until you're finally off the drugs because you become so numb. You're blunted. Your emotions are blunted. At the end of the day, I wish these medicines worked. I truly do. That's why I took them. I believed that they would work, and I believed what the doctors told me. But when I started taking these medicines, they told us there was no hope of recovery. You'll be on these medicines for the rest of your life. And then it's, well, you're on one pill, and then you've taken that pill so long, your body no longer responds to it, so they have to take you off that one and give you another one, or else add another one. And it's just all about them giving you a bunch of drugs, and these are powerful drugs. Some of these drugs are like horse tranquilizers. So and I got to remember where we were, because we had to fight for a lot of stuff. We had to fight for insurance companies to cover the medication and the therapy. Remember, we had to fight for parity. We had to fight in Kentucky for peer support specialists to cover. It had to be covered by Medicaid to get it passed. And, that's why we have to go to legislators for everything and beg them to change stuff. And they don't want to, and that takes 20 years sometimes in Kentucky to get something changed in the legislation. And that, like what I was talking about, with them taking your children, that's in the legislation. That's written into our law. They can take your children due to your disability and not work to reunify them. That's a eugenics plan, folks. Let's call it what it is. They pick on poor people. That makes me mad. So just give me a second here. I want to read you something. Judy Chamberlain wrote on my own, and this is from her book. Wanting better treatment is not the same as wanting the right to be free of all unwanted labels, treatments, and procedures. Better treatment in the absence of fundamental rights is merely seeking a more comfortable, less confining prison. People that get forced into mental institutions are treated like a criminal when there's been no crime committed. In most cases, if it's a criminal crime, they're in a prison type psychiatric unit, not with other people in most cases. So, there's laws, they're called AOT, it's forced outpatient treatment. And the judge can order it, and they can come in and basically arrest you and take you to the mental institution. And then you got to, try to convince the judge that you're not mentally ill to get out. And then they've got a name for that. Agnosia, I can't think of it, but it's like when you don't realize you're mentally ill and you need to be forced against your will. And that's something the people in Kentucky came up with too, like just to be able to force their adult children into the psych unit and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of abuse that goes on. And I served on protection and advocacy for 8 years. And some of the work I did was going into these personal care homes where people were released from the institution and they were forced to get a shot every month to take their medicine. And one lady had the shaking disease. I can't pronounce it or say it, but Beverly will talk about it a little bit. And the whole time I was coming off the medicine, I kept thinking, oh my God, please don't let me have the shaking disease. And it's just where your body is shaking inside and out uncontrollably, and you just want to kill yourself. And I knew about it, and I share about it because people have killed themselves. And that's what you're looking at when you're trying to come off the medicine sometimes. So in Beverly's book, there's like withdrawal. We have to set up systems so people can withdraw from this medicine like they do heroin. Withdrawal, I don't even know what you call it, withdrawal management. And we need to be de-prescribing. Doctors need to stop. I guarantee you, anybody can walk in their doctor's office or get online and do a medical and say, look, I've been having these feelings for 3 weeks or longer. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm whatever. You give them symptoms, they're going to give you a medicine. These drugs are dangerous. So anyway, I'm going to check and see if my friend's here yet, Beverly. It looks like she is. I think. Hold on a minute. Is Beverly here? Okay, I'm just going to take 1 minute. Give me a minute here. Okay, she's trying to get in the room. I'm going to tell her to try again. So anyway, don't shoot the messenger. Once I got off these drugs, I contacted the manufacturer of Paxil to let them know what happened to me. And that's probably laughable now, but that's one of the first things I did, because these drug companies have to be liable for the misery they're causing. There's death and destruction all along the way. They're lying about their clinical trials. And here's one. You murdered my daughter, said the mom of an opioid victim. It's a statement to which many families were victims of medical harm relate, regardless of the type of pharma product that caused the decline in deaths of those they loved. There's a pandemic prescribing of antidepressants. So once you know, you do have a duty to warn others, and don't shoot the messengers. We're not coming to take your drugs. We're just trying to tell you, you may have a problem 20 years down the road if you're on them that long. These drugs were meant short term, not for the rest of your life. So I was really lied to. And there's people I know personally that committed suicide on these drugs. I carry that. We carry these deaths with us. Beverly's book has a whole section of patient stories, people that lost family members. And then we have Dr. McFillin on Facebook that, he's coming out. Professional people are coming out, doctors, and saying, how will we look back in 50 years from now on mass psychiatric drugging of our population to deal with the distress of living? On children, history informs us that in time we will look back with great horror at what we once believed to be true, safe, and helpful. There's no chemical imbalance in your brain. Your brain believes what you tell it. Tell it you're fine. Tell it you're healthy. Believe me, it works. That's how I got better. So I got off the medicine after being on them 20 years. I didn't know if it would kill me or not, but it was worth it because I had no quality of life. So I got off the meds. I went for trauma-informed care. And then I went back to the table at the state level and said, look, here's what happened to me. I was medicated. I got better when I got off the medicine. It wasn't mental illness. It was trauma. How many people are being, medicated that are not seriously mentally ill? Dr. McFillin covers that a lot on Twitter. And Beverly can't get in. She said it lets her in and keeps cutting her out. Sorry, you guys. I had to tell him that. I can't talk and type and do all this at the same time. So, which side of history are you going to be on? I'm still trying to fix things with my family 20 years later. I lost my grandson. And he was diagnosed with something. I lost my daughter. I mean, yeah, they were older, but it doesn't hurt any less just because, they see the courts say I'm mentally ill and like I'm dangerous. I wasn't dangerous. I've never been dangerous. But you know what? If you take somebody's child, that might make them dangerous because that's something you fight over. Think about a mama bear. So basically, I do want to thank the people that I learned from. I read Robert Whitaker's book, Man in America. And I watched Generation RX. I follow Kevin Miller. I watch Medicating Normal. And I just keep learning and I keep trying to educate other people. And what I've done lately with Beverly's book is I've bought 2 copies specifically for doctors that are treating me right now. I think, we need to get her book and this information into the hands of professionals that are treating people that are writing these drugs. You got to cut off the flow of blood. I don't know where the rest of my team is here. Hold on just a second. I'm going to try to figure out where my host is. If you guys have questions, you can put it in the chat box. And I'll answer them. I'm trying to send him a message. I'm not a technology person. And I want to talk about this more. Like people with Alzheimer's, they're drugging all these geriatric patients, older people in nursing homes, putting them on antipsychotics. And my husband got Alzheimer's, and he ended up in psych too. They commit them in psych, like if they get in the wrong room. I mean, we are hurting and abusing people. We are doing harm. And that bothers me, the children and the elderly, but it's not just them, it's anybody and everybody can fall into this. So I guess I'm doing the show alone here.
All right, Kentucky Blue Blood, I am here. We're having some technical difficulties with our guest. At this time, I added them in, and they apparently got booted. So, Kentucky Blue Blood, would you like me to give a brief history of Wlfensberger's theory and how it can be used to devalue those with disabilities and how it can still be used in today's society?
Yes, that would be great, Tim. Thank you.
All right. So, as Kentucky Blue Blood said in her story, she was pretty much had a very good life, a family, a business, living the American dream, the whole 9 yards. And then this situation with the mental illness diagnosis came along, and then she got devalued. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Wlfensberger came up with a theory of social role valorization, or SRV. What that is creating patterns of roles for people with primarily intellectual disabilities, and it can apply to those with developmental disabilities, such as husband, wife, mother, father, employee could be a role. Okay, those are some valued roles. Then again, they can create devalued roles for the person. So let's say that person isn't well liked. Let's say, oh, Blind Metal Gamer, we don't like Blind Metal Gamer because, he's a jerk and he likes to be mean to people. They can create devalued roles that make you be in a situation where the person is devalued and feels like they're worthless and hopeless. And, you would think that in 2022, this would not be happening. Well, guess what? That's incorrect. Isn't that right, Kentucky Blue Blood?
Right.
It's still going on. If you want, you can elaborate further on that experience in your life, and then I can come back with what it was like, how it kind of applied to me in some way. So
Okay.
once again, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I have to tell you, because, you know, when I come to the table, I evaluate you like a mystery shopper. Everybody, whether you're listening or not, we watch what you're doing. Whether we're at the table or not, we're paying attention to you agencies in the state. And also, we learn from you, but we also criticize we're going to be critical of what you do or what you do wrong. So my last big thing was I thought I'd try Voc Rehab out, because I actually want to go back to work. I would like to go back to work, but I have had some physical problems. So I was dealing with my heart stuff, and I really got mad at them because I also am blind in one eye. So they decided first they were okay. The first girl was okay. I was a little leery of them. I'm very untrusting of state agencies, but nonetheless, I thought, well, you can see how they treat people with disabilities. So the first girl was okay. Well, then she decided I needed the blind services instead of her. Well, that's where the problem started. So she sent me over to the blind services. Well, nobody contacted me. Nobody contacted me. So, like, almost a month later, I called up there and complained. I raised hell about it. I called their main office because I didn't have this girl's number. They don't like you to have their number. I figured it out because I had 2 supervisors and 3 workers. None of the workers gave me their numbers. They do not want you to call them or email them. Well, the last worker did, because she said, I think you're mentally ill. I know your mental illness is supposedly in remission, full remission, but when you call up here and complain, we think that's mental illness, and you better not do that to me. Right, girl, you're not going to shut my mouth. Nobody shut it this far, so forget it. But anyway, yeah, that's what she said. So basically, I never did get my blind services. They made me an appointment for a low vision exam, like 3 months away. They expect you to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to another city when you're blind. You can't see. They don't give you their number. They don't make it easy to access you. Yeah, that made me mad. What if somebody's blind in both eyes trying to access blind services? Really? Y'all just make me sick. So yeah, I did a whole lot of complaining with Voc Rehab, and I'll continue to do that every chance I get. No, I won't refer anybody to Voc Rehab because you treat people terrible. Treat people the way you'd want to be treated. And then you roll over everybody when they're trying to tell you what they want and what they need for their services. You just roll right over them and keep going. No, I hated the way you treated me, and I won't be back. I'll get a reasonable accommodation before I ask for any blind services. And the state of Kentucky had to merge with the blind services. So I always heard about, like, oh, how terrible they were. So I thought, well, maybe they'll be better now that the state's merged with them. No, they're not better. And you know what? Blind people deserve better. People with disabilities deserve better. And you're all supposed to be educated in people with disabilities. Well, maybe you need to get educated in trauma-informed care, because you're creating problems for people. So anyway, the blind services, and then to get the glasses, I could get the glasses here, but I had to go get the exam either in Northern Kentucky or Lexington, like an hour and a half away from me. And they were using my insurance. So all they were going to reimburse me for was what my insurance didn't cover. But yet they couldn't just let me go where I wanted and reimburse me. So they're not, they're not person-centered, and nothing about me without me didn't happen there. So I was kind of appalled. And I've heard other people tell me, Voc Rehab takes months to get back to people. Well, by then you'll be dead or not ready to work. So fortunately, I get to complained to Blind Metal Gamer, and he's like, "Oh, that's Wlfenberger." And I said, I feel like they treated me like I was mentally, something was wrong with me mentally, like I had a mental disability of some kind. And bringing up my disability, throwing that in my face because they didn't want me to complain about them. Who are you? You can't decide who's mentally ill. My doctor put my mental illness in full remission. Who are you at Voc Rehab to think you know more than my doctor or me after just talking to me one time? And the other thing I really don't like, Voc Rehab gets in your medical records. Now, why do they need my medical records to get me a job? That's creepy. You don't give an employer your medical records. To me, they're like an employment agency. Why do they need my medical records? That, like I said, I didn't fight them on that because I was trying to go along to get along. But there's a whole lot of things I don't like about the process. Now, I do have one more thing I want to read that's quite profound. This is from Judy Chamberlain, author of On Our Own. Once it has been decided a person has a sick mind, enormous social consequences occur. A finding of mental illness, which is often judicial as well as a medical determination, results in the loss of liberties. So you lose your rights once you have a mental illness, and you don't even realize it until you go to try to exercise them. Believe me, you do not want to be tagged with mental illness. You can never lose the diagnosis. Mine is marked in full remission. Honestly, I didn't even know you could get that. I was shocked to see that. I didn't ask for that. My doctor noted that in my medical records. But, that can keep people from getting in the military if they've ever taken an antidepressant. Your mental history, your mental health history will stay with you. And, I don't know, at some point, I think even to become a lawyer, I don't know about a doctor, but to become an attorney, you couldn't have mental illness. I think that has changed, but it's not a good thing. Medical professionals sometimes will treat you bad if they think you have a mental illness, or think, again, you're lying, that you're not valid, that you're not credible. And I think, what I found I've owned 2 companies. I've always worked in business. I've trained a lot of people. I've mentored a lot of people. They get better when you believe in them and you encourage them and you show them the way. It's not rocket science. And talking to anybody, even if it's not a therapist, to your friend or, to a peer, is very beneficial to you as much as therapy can be. Those are the things that worked for me. And I still have to do it, with the COVID and stuff. I was really worried I'd go into a deep depression, but I didn't. And I've been off medication 10 years. So, have I had some depression? Yes. But you know what? There's a reason for it. We've been, stuck in, we're not around people. So you have to look at, like, if you're showing depression or anxiety, is there a reason for it? Is there a medical reason? There could be something medically wrong that could be causing your symptoms. Are you on a medication? It could be a side effect of. But basically, if somebody's died, or you've lost a boyfriend, a husband, a divorce, whatever, sometimes we have a reason to be depressed. And you don't need to medicate that. You just need support and, to work through it. It's not going to last forever. It'll pass. We can't take a pill every time we feel uncomfortable or, panic to take a pill. And I think Beverly will talk about this, but there's a dependence. It's really not an addiction, but there's a dependency on these drugs. And I talked to other people. I think there is a psychological component to it where, you think, oh my gosh, I need my medicine, that you become to rely on that pill. But one thing Dr. McFillin says, he says SSRIs simply don't work and ultimately will destroy health when on them for an extended amount of time. Family docs are pushing them on patients as pharma-sponsored continuing education seminars and marketing pamphlets are telling them they should. He said pharma owns primary care. So, do your education, do your research, because sometimes the doctors don't even know you got a taper. And people that don't taper can end up in long-term withdrawal that can last a year, a couple years. And you just got to be really careful when you're coming off these medications. I do have people message me and ask about the medications, how to get off of them. And you can Google your medication and ask how to withdraw. Several credible sites come up. And you also should always talk to your doctor about it, because there is a way to taper, and you need to do that. And if your doctor tells you don't need to taper, you need to find a new doctor. I mean, I'm sorry that's this harsh, but so I like that social workers are getting this. I know of 2 social workers. Monica, she had the Beyond Med site. These are social workers that got psychiatrized, and they consider themselves a psychiatric survivor. But this lady, Sonia Steibel, has been urging the Massachusetts legislature to pass a bill for years now. She's a licensed social worker and now community organizer who identifies as a psychiatric survivor. She suffered terribly from taking benzos for years, just as she was prescribed. The proposed legislation would require prescribers of benzos to provide patients with information regarding the risk of benzos, including long-term harms. That should be a given. Our doctors should be doing this, but she's getting this law passed to make sure it's a law. So think of the significance of that. We need that to be in every state. It's a benzo bill. So, it's not just me, the layman out here, that has lived experience. There's professional people with lived experience that are saying the same thing. There are professionals. Robert Whitaker is an independent journalist. His research, and he also wrote Anatomy of an Epidemic. So, unlike when I started on this medication 20, 25 years ago, there was hardly no books or no literature to tell you anything about even bipolar disorder. Today, you've got the internet, you've got, there's Facebook groups, there's people on social media you can follow. Made in America has a website with tons of articles. So there's no reason for you to not have, even if the doctor's not informing you, you can inform yourself. And then you can inform the doctor. So you have a responsibility at this point. But the thing that got me the most was that they lied about the chemical imbalance theory, because we believed that. I mean, if you remember the first commercials, I think it was Zoloft maybe, it's like, because you think something is wrong with you, but trauma-informed care is, it's not asking someone what's wrong with them, it's asking them what happened to them. And that is it in a nutshell. What happened to me is what's making me act like this. And then on top of what happened to you, you got people treating you bad because they think you're mentally ill. Why can't we just treat people nicer and better? What if we gave the people with disabilities and mental illness the best care of all? Instead of let's kick them while they're down and treat them like a piece of dirt. I mean, everybody does better when they're encouraged and feel valued. So I think that's on my high horse, but I do want to give a lot of credit. And I know I'm not naming everybody. Pat Reiser was he was a consumer. All of us were considered consumers. I don't like that term, but that means we were consumers of the medication. Uh, and he got better, and he did his own work to help people. He's from Ohio. He died. A lot of us have died. Penny Darby, she did the Willard suitcases they left, people that went to the mental institution in New York, Willard, and they thought they would be coming out, they would get better and get to come home. So it shows what was in the suitcases they left that were found in the attic. And Kentucky, I work with 4 other researchers here in Kentucky, and we've preserved a lot of the asylum history and history of people with disabilities on a website called www.kyhi.org. And if you have anything you would like for us to post about your family on our website, or if you have any history of Kentucky asylums, there's a cemetery project. Back then, if you were in the asylums, they just dumped you in outside the door in a grave in some of the asylums. So anybody that was in an unmarked grave, like the gravestones are marked unknown, we named those people and put them on an online memorial, because there's people that people's family are looking for them and trying to find some records of them when they were in the institutions. And my sister was in an institution in Louisville, and she'll be dead 50 years in 2026. I have to wait 50 years for her to be dead for me to get the institution records on my sister. And she died in a restraint in the hospital at Hazelwood in Louisville. And that's part of the reasons I always, if you follow me on Twitter, I always speak out against restraints. We're restraining children with disabilities in the schools. We're breaking their legs. We're hurting them. We're killing them. We need to stop that. Oh my gosh, do you know how traumatic it is to be put in a restraint? And anybody that's going to restrain people, it's for your safety too. But you need to know how to properly restrain people. For your own protection and the other. But basically, people are misusing restraints and misusing medicine, because the medicine can be a chemical restraint itself. And there's a lot of abuse that can happen to people with disabilities, people that are vulnerable. So a lot of my work is, when I'm up here speaking, I'm speaking for the people that have no voice, the people that are stuck in institutions, or, trying to get back to their community, or in mental institutions, or in personal care homes, in group homes. I'm not speaking for every one of you. I'm speaking for the people that have no voice. The foster care children are being drugged to the hilt. Some of the foster care kids are on 5 medications every time they get moved to a new location. They get a new diagnosis and a medication. And so, I'm sitting in a meeting where I'm at the table, and they're saying, well, how are we going to get these children off the medication? The same way you got them on, one at a time, very slowly. But the good news is, if you're in the state custody as a foster kid, you can choose at age 15 to decide if you want to be on that medicine or not. So I do like that. But, why are we medicating these children? Reunify them with their family. That would go a long way. And, there was a new legislation in 2018. I think it's called the Family Act. I think 38 states have implemented it. Kentucky has not. And that is where it's federal guidelines where you have to work on reunification of the family. And you have to provide services before you remove the children. So I think that would go a long way in the agony you're creating on families by removing the children from the family.
Yes, it would.
Thank you, Tim. Beverly's still trying to get in, I think.
Try resending her the link. Let's see if that'll help.
Can you send it over to her on Twitter?
Yeah. Let me get that set up real quick. But yeah, as we get that done, as we get that complete, I do want to let everyone know that what Kentucky Blue Blood was saying, that there's a lot of things that need to change. A lot. And what she spoke about is very much needed. I mean, you have all these things that are going on with the psychiatric medications and whatnot. That needs to go. I mean, there's a lot of things that have got to change, and they're right for now. As of now, they're not really changing the way they need to be changed. They need to change it for the better and get things to where people can get off these drugs, because they're dangerous. They're dangerous. These things are nasty, and I think Kentucky Blue Blood, if you could maybe resend her that on Twitter, because I'm having some difficulties on my end. I apologize, folks. We are having some technical issues with our guest.
Okay, that's all right. I got it.
All right, she's got it. So, okay, as we were discussing earlier with Wlfensberger and his theory, Kentucky Blue Blood was talking about being devalued. Well, I too kind of experienced that in a way. As you know, I went to the School for the Blind and in Louisville, and while there, it was great. Again, OVR, when they were DFB, I'm going to go back and take you down memory lane. For those of you who know, when it was DFB, they were like, oh yeah, blind metal gamer, you can get all this stuff, for school and have a rewarding career and a rewarding life. Okay, great. We're all in. And then when I go to make the transition to the typically developing world, or as the blind community calls it, the sighted world, oh, he needs to just get a job, because all he can do is get a job. The other isn't good enough. Well, I went, as we all know, in the last time we talked, Kentucky Blue Blood, I did attempt the higher education route, and that didn't work out. And why did it not work out? I didn't have what I needed. And I think it was because I didn't go the way that the DFB OVR wanted me to go. Then I found out when I started working at my current position, oh, he's got everything he needs and all this. So one thing I would love to see happen in the future, and again, I'm just talking about for future generations here, instead of this menu-based cookie-cutter model of, okay, you can either do A or B, make it person-centered. Make that a person-centered experience for each individual. Granted, I understand, they got rules in place because they don't want someone in there partying and goofing off or whatever, wasting their funds, and I get that. But if you have a specific goal or a specific thing you want to accomplish or at least explore, um, do more of a person centered approach, because that would be the best route to success, I would think. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and talk ill about anyone because that's not how I roll. So, Kentucky Blue Blood, is there any update on our guest?
She's not responding on Twitter. I told her you sent a
Hmm.
new link.
I sent it in Messenger too. Ooh.
Well, that's what I told her. It's on Facebook. I said it's on Facebook messaging.
Right. And so yeah, I can't believe when you said you had to wait. You have to wait until 2026 just to get the. Wow, that freaked me out. Just to get
Well,
the records on
yeah.
your sister. That's nuts.
I mean, what are they hiding? But you know what? In the meantime, when I sued the doctors
It
civilly, well,
makes
the
you
medical
wonder.
board came in on the doctor's case because we had a civil suit. So the medical
Mhm.
board had to, he took me down to the institution and he signed in. So the medical board pulled a lot of their records and I was able to get some
Mhm.
records that way. And that's how I knew they were restraining both her and my brother 16 hours out of 24 hours a day. They
That's
were
horrible.
in restraints. And she died.
Now,
Both of them died in restraints.
I do have somewhat of an odd, random question. Again, I've never had that experience. If you had, and again, I'm not trying to bring up any type of trauma type thing, but for the listeners out there who either are listening live or who will be listening on demand, could you describe
These available on Prolific.
the restraints, like what they were like kind of like what would I mean? What did they look like? Is what
Well,
I'm trying to get at.
I
You
didn't
know,
actually see the restraints because they didn't restrain them when we came to visit. They took them out of the restraints. But I do know the
gotcha.
kind of restraint. It's called POSEY, POSEY.
Hmm.
Uh, Susan from Protection and Advocacy told me those kind of restraints are now outlawed. But it's I
Outlawed.
think it's some
Wow.
kind of harness. Like she was in a rocking chair and they tie
Hmm.
them in like it covers the top part. But she
Hmm.
slid down. She wanted to get out of the rocking chair in the day room, and she choked to death on the restraint trying to
Ah,
there.
so it
But here's the
basically.
thing. Here's the
Hmm.
thing. Why wasn't there an adult in that room watching them?
That makes me wonder the same thing. Why didn't they have a staff member, a caregiver, watch them to make sure that didn't happen? You know
Because
that
the restraints were the babysitters. That's why I found out they were in those restraints 16 hours a day. They treated them worse than animals. A
so they
dog tied up outside. Think about that. 16 hours a day in a cage. They were human beings. I'm
that's
pissed.
horrible.
Yes, I'm pissed.
Horrible. Yeah,
I'll never get over what they did to my siblings, and I'll
Kentucky
never
Blue Blood.
stop talking about it.
I don't because you know what? It's horrible. It needs
And
to
you know what?
stop.
There's
It needs
still
to
people
stop.
in restraints. Governor Brashear, kiss my ass. There's still people in restraints in institutions in Kentucky. Y'all can act like there's not. We all know this is still going on. People are still dying. You're inhumane. Get it stopped now. Where's the legislation on these restraints, you assholes?
Yes, it needs to stop. It needs to stop now.
I'm
Not
tired of
5 years.
begging
Not
them. I'm tired of
2026.
begging them. They
Not
don't care.
2036. Now it's 2022. It's not 1902. It's not 1822. It's not 1422. It's 2022. And you know what? That Wlfensberger theory. There's one part of that, a big part of that. You touched on this earlier. Nothing about you without you, and that totally excludes that theory. It excludes that, and that needs to change too because if they're going to keep doing this in 2022, God knows. I mean, we need to stop it now because in 2032, if it don't stop now, it's only going to get worse.
It hasn't stopped. You know, at the time we thought when Alice died that way, that was an isolated incident. Well, then I find out doing all this research, it wasn't an isolated incident. The court even came in after she died and another person died the same way. I think he choked on a
Mm-hmm.
stock, but he
Mm-hmm.
was in a restraint too. That's on our site. These are human rights violations, people. These
Yes,
are
they
not
are.
animals. Animals are treated better than our people with disabilities. Basically, I'm saying that. I know I'm probably going to piss people off, but God damn it, I'm pissed off. You killed two of my siblings that way that had disabilities. They were like babies. They weighed under 40 pounds. It makes me mad. How dare you?
Kentucky Blue Blood, you
They
have a
got
right to be pissed.
they got better treatment in our home than the state ever gave them. And we never wanted them to go into those snake pit institutions that Kentucky has.
Wow, very
Sorry,
powerful.
yeah.
Hey, this is your time. This is your opportunity to speak, and I'm giving you the platform to speak.
Thank you.
You say it your way, and this is your story. And like I said, it needs to change. I mean, it's everywhere.
Well, how can the state not be held to the same standard as a parent? The state can kill off our kids, take our kids, kill them, let them get sexually abused, raped, and everything else, and there's no accountability. That's bullshit. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about this shit. And if you want to say I'm mentally ill, say it. Because you know what? You killed my brother and sister. So, fuck you.
Hey, I mean, I have a theory as to why they can do how they can get away with what they get away with. May I explain my theory?
Oh, sure.
All right, my theory is this, and again, this is only speculation, so take this with 1,058 dump trucks of salt. Just take those dump trucks of salt and dump them right out there, and to prepare to be. I'm not really amazed, but just prepare for this theory, because this, again, my theory is this. When you sign the papers, right? When the papers are signed, okay, they agree to let them provide care, and they're
Oh, no,
saying,
they had to go to court, I'm sure. That was probably a dependency case. They probably dragged my mommy and daddy through the courts and humiliated them a little more. And fuck you for that, too. Fuck you, bastards, for every goddamn member of my family you've touched with your fucking dependency shit. Fuck off, bitches.
hey, that you're right. I get it. So my theory is,
I'm sorry, but you
it's
know
all
what?
good. Don't worry.
Tim told me I could cuss, and I rarely do cuss, but you know what?
You can, if
Fuck you
you,
for what you did to my family. You bitches. I hope you burn in hell, every one of you whores.
if you, that, right, hey, this is your story. So, here's my theory as to why I think that this has gone on for so long. And again, this is only a theory. This is not fact. So for those of you who are wondering, I'm not being accusatory when I say what I'm going to say here. I'm not accusing anyone or pointing the finger of guilt. This is just a theory because, again, I did go to a blind school, and I don't know if that would be considered institution or not, but since it's a state school,
Well, it's a little bit different kind of an institution, but if you're boarded there and stuff,
right, I was there throughout the week, and I would go home on the
but
weekend.
you were free to leave, weren't you?
When I turned 18 and I got the opportunity to go to public school, I jumped all over.
But I mean, when you went to the blind school, like when my siblings were in the institution, they had no choice. Like my mom wrote letters after my sister died, and she went back down there and saw Jeffrey in a restraint. My mommy couldn't take them home, and I'm sure that was heartbreaking for her to, and she really sent a scathing letter to the nuns about him being in a restraint. But they're not free to leave. You know what I mean? Even if your parent put you there, you're not free to leave. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. So in other words, you're there pretty much the all week, no going back home.
You're a ward of the state. Right. Yeah, you're not ever allowed to go back home.
At KSB,
going back home is not an option.
KSB, the way they did it was when I first started, they would go home. The students would go home once a month. But see, I got around that because my family would come pick me up every Friday, and then they would take me back every Sunday. So, and then in the 90s, it got to be where
good.
It got to be where
some of the institutions work that way.
A lot of your blind schools would do that. A lot of the blind
But it was
schools,
a school, you know what I'm saying? These weren't
right,
schools. I mean, Frankfurt
right.
had they wanted parents to think these were schools. Like Frankfurt at one point
Hmm.
was named Frankfurt State Hospital and School, and people thought they were sending their disabled children there to learn a trade and to, learn more than they could teach them at home. And they weren't. They were abusing them there. Like that's part of the history we have on the website. They were abused. They were hosed down. Like instead of giving them a bath, they got the hose out like a fire hose and hosed them
Hmm.
down.
Oh, at KSB, there was none of that. There was none of that. We lived in dormitories, kind of like on a college campus. We had various, we went to school 7 hours a day, like in a public school. We would learn the same curriculum as a public school. However, it was modified with braille or large text, assistive technology for the blind and visually impaired. And they would basically, we would live there 5 days a week, Sunday night through Thursday night. Now, they would never, the things you described in your story, that never was there as far as restraints and all of that. Now, what they could do is if a student was acting up, they could call the parents and, suspend them, give them detention, like in a public school.
Right.
The only difference was that you were at the blind school and it was more in self-contained just for the blind. The one thing that I'm not trying to veer off topic here, but that I would, if I could change anything there, I would improve would be the following. When I was there, they would wait till your junior or senior year to really start discussing, what are you going to do after you leave, after graduation, independent living, and how I would do it if I was running the place would be this. I would start doing real world stuff in middle school. They get in sixth grade, start having them think about, careers and independent living. And I would have it where the independent program there, instead of it being a 2-year program for juniors and seniors, I would have it be a 4-year program for all the way through high school.
I
Have
think
it
that's a good idea.
because when you graduate there in May and you get your diploma, that safety net's gone. That
Right.
that net is gone, and then
Well,
you're
and
out
I
in the
think
real
that
world.
don't you think that happens for most kids with disabilities? They lose the safety net at 18.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
And
then
a lot of people don't even find out the resources that are out there for them until they're already over 18. We need to
right,
make them better with that.
that needs to change. I think that's why I think they should start having those conversations with those kids in middle school, not in
Even in
high school.
public school, though, I'm not, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Whether it's private school, the blind school, or public school, we need to empower people with children with disabilities, students with disabilities from birth on. I mean, we need to
Yep.
empower the parents. Knowledge is power there.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
what I see. Like that breaks my heart because like I always measure like what happened to my siblings, what it was like in the 60s because they couldn't go to
Hmm.
school, they
Right.
couldn't go to church, they had to stay on the outskirts of society. So I measure how far have we come? Is it better or worse? I'm always using that as my measuring stick.
Right.
I can't stand it. That's why I get so mad when you hurt my people with disabilities. That's like you're hurting my brothers and sisters all over again. And it hurts my
And
heart.
that's understandable. I
It hurts
mean,
my heart so much.
and even from the public school experience, I experienced both. Because I went to public school for a year. I graduated public school.
Oh, you did?
I did not graduate KSB. I refused because I could see it for myself. The decline of how that school was going.
Oh,
Because,
wow.
yeah, see, when the ADA came along in 1990, these public schools had to play catch up. A lot of the public schools, and it took some time, but a lot of those public schools had to play catch up and had to really kind of get on the ball and get going as far as services and technologies for people with disabilities. And when that would happen, I saw a lot of students exit KSB and go to their public school. So answering your question, yes, students could leave the school to go to their home school if they chose and if the family chose. Or or if the students they had an appointment or a family emergency, they could go home and take care of that. You know, um, but when I went to public school, again, it was the early 2000s. Things were a little different, so they were still learning the whole concept of a blind person in the typically developing, or as the blind community likes to call it, the sighted world. And they had a lot to learn. So in a way, I was kind of like the testing, the proving ground of that. There were things there that I didn't agree with as far as limitations. I'm not going to name names or anything like that because it would be kind of pointless for this. But I think, again, had there been more education on a blind person and how he or she is, and they're not all one size fits all stereotypical versions, the experience would have been different. I think had there been more education there, things would have been different. But there was not. So I had to be the one to show them and say, hey, this is how it is. And when I graduated in 2002, which will be 20 years ago next month, um, I believe I set the standard and really blazed the trail for what you have today.
Wow, Tim.
You know, and so yeah, I don't know if our guest is coming or not.
I don't think she can get on. I've been
Ooh,
messaging her.
then what we will do is, if you want, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing before I wrap things up?
Um, Basically, I would just like to say thank you for listening. I apologize for cussing, but that's where my passion comes from. When you lose people, your sister and your brother that way, that's lifelong trauma. My family suffers from that trauma today. As long as I'm alive, it's going to bother me because I haven't even gotten an apology. I have not gotten one acknowledgement from one governor.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
and I really thought Andy would change things, but, and I commend him. He's done more than most governors
yes, he
for
has.
people with disabilities.
Yes.
But we were waiting on we were working for an apology for all these people in unmarked graves with legislators when I served on P&A. Uh,
Mhm.
why can't they apologize? That would
They
go a
need
long
to. They
way.
need to. They
So
need
it's not
to.
just my family, Tim. There's hundreds of people in unmarked graves that have been devalued and disrespected by the state. And it's not just the state of Kentucky. Every state has these institutions and these cemeteries.
Yes, it's that.
Uh,
That is
so
fact. Every
that's
state has
all
them.
of our shame. All of our. It's a shame. And you know what? I'm tired of waiting. People with disabilities have been in line waiting for a long damn time. It's our
Yes, we
time,
have. Yes, we
y'all.
have.
And if I was healthier, I would lead the movement, but I can't do it because I'm not well enough. I might get better enough, but Arthur Campbell and I talked about this. You guys, Tim, and you younger people one day will listen to this video probably after I'm gone. It's up to you guys to pick up the torches we're leaving because we're not always going to be here to fight this fight. We have to count on people like you to be good advocates and to continue
Yes.
fight. It'll never be over.
No, it will not. Um, and it's the fight's going to be ongoing. It's not just going to end with us. The new generation's coming up,
Yes.
and I can, I've seen some people. Again, I'm not going to name names, but I know of some people that have a lot of promise and a lot of fire to do this as advocates and to do great things. And again, what I do in my work, it might not be like much, but I'm again leading the way, blazing the trail.
Well, one of the
Um,
most valuable things I think you've done is having these podcasts, Tim, because you've got a record. You're creating a history here, and you're giving people the opportunity to have their voice heard, to share their stories. And when we share our stories, we're sharing other people's stories. It might not be identical, but
mm-mm.
we're their voice too, and we can be their
Yes, we
hope.
are. Yes, we are. All right. So, With that being said, those are great words of wisdom, very affection, very informative, very informative, and it's been a very educational and informative conversation today with Kentucky Blue Blood. Again, thank you for joining. For those of you who will be listening on Spotify, Anchor, Radio Public, TuneIn, and other podcasting platforms, this will be the conclusion of season 4 of the Blindside Podcast. Season 5 will be picking up in August of 2022. We'll be back in the fall. And the first guest on the new season, which will be season 5, will be Denver Queen. She'll be here to tell her story of guardianship and how it affected her life and how she got her guardianship rights restored after several years of having to fight the fight and get her guardianship rights resurrected. So, with that being said, again, I want to thank Kentucky Blue Blood for joining. I want to apologize to Beverly Thompson. We had technical difficulties with getting her on. There might be a way maybe in season 5 where we can get her on. I've been working with other ways to record for other things, so I'll work on that during the interim over the summer break. So, with that being said, for everyone on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button for great podcasting content as well as gaming content exclusive to YouTube. And if you're enjoyers of Twitch, be sure to follow me over at twitch.tv/blindmetalgamer, as I also stream episodes of the Blindside Podcast on there as well. And I provide gaming content every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So, with that being said, for everyone listening and for Kentucky Blue Blood, so long, everyone, and peace out. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Blindside Podcast. You can find the Blindside Podcast on a plethora of platforms, including Spotify, YouTube, Pocket Cast, Castbox, TuneIn Radio, and much more. Be sure to follow on Spotify so you will not miss a single episode.